This is the West Virginia Capital Report. Funding for the West Virginia Capital Report is brought to you by Mark A. Hunt and Associates and by the AFL-CIO of West Virginia.
Hello and welcome to the Capital Report, where we're under the dome today in the third day of the legislative session. We're glad to have with us today the President of the AFT, Christine Campbell. Christine, welcome.
Thank you, Dave. How are you?
I'm great. As we look at the state of affairs in West Virginia relevant to teachers and so forth, where we're 725 some teachers short, and that projection is to grow larger, it appears that much of the legislation we're looking at may drive teachers away. We talked about a pay raise of 1%. What's that mean to teachers?
Well, actually, it means for a starting teacher, it means about $330 a year. For starting public employees, it means about $200 to $250 a year. You spread that out over the course of the year, given the attacks that are coming down on teachers, service personnel, and public employees. It really begs the question, is $300 a year enough to keep people in West Virginia working?
Or keep people coming into the profession?
Absolutely.
And we also see where we talk about revenue effects, PEIA. PEIA has been an issue again this year, and I understand there's been cuts there, and they talked about using total family income towards premium.
We have had, for the past several years, every time we turn around, there's another cut in benefits. There's now increases in premiums. Talked about total household income and collapsing those tiers. So right before the session, we come away with the issues that we face in PEIA and then start the session with issues on employee rights. So when we look at how are we attracting qualified people to the profession, what are we doing if we're offering a minuscule pay raise? And the other question is, where does that come from? Because if you are talking about cutting taxes and the business inventory tax, those are funds that go directly into the public education system. So if we're going to give an increase to the salaries, we're $5,000 to $20,000 behind bordering states. So we're still not going to make up the difference in a course of 2 years or 5 years, because those will continue to grow. And we're looking at what will these business inventory tax cuts actually do to public education funding.
Public education funding at the local level.
Exactly.
The inventory tax down, which would dramatically affect general revenues in each county.
And there's another discussion about distributing public education dollars to voucher programs. Voucher programs, they're calling them education savings accounts, which is a fancy name for a public school to private voucher. And the idea, the messaging is that you can use this to get services for your students that you wouldn't be able to get through public education. When in rural areas, that public education is pretty much the only place you can get those services. And people with special needs, they'll bring services to the school that child needs. So we're trying to send the money out of public education into private corporations that may or may not exist, and cutting public education funding through this tax change. What are we doing to bring people in? What are we doing to lift up the teachers that spend every single day and the service personnel that spend every single day trying to do what's best for our children?
In addition to bringing teachers in, and what do they do every day and what do they do inside and outside the day? Of course, some of the legislation has required additional mandates for teachers and will require additional mandates for teachers.
Yes, there was a bill last year, and it's back again this year to require educators to post everything online. A lot of schools do that already. I don't know why we need a mandate to do that. And it should be left up to the educator how they communicate with their parents. Most of the educators would rather communicate personally with their parents And we already have all these mandates as far as paperwork. So when legislators say we just want teachers to be able to teach, why are we proposing bills that would actually hinder that?
I know that the general philosophy has been that we want flexibility. We want local decisions made at the local level, but it would appear that that's not happening.
Well, and we say we want qualified people in the classroom, yet the bills that are going after seniority, are we really going to get qualified, experienced people who have been working with students more to keep those folks in the classroom, or are we taking away all the job security that they currently have? And if you want to bog down another system and go back to all these things have to be dealt with, it's logistically problematic. It's also problematic for what students are going to get from the most qualified people with experience in the classroom, and you start that. It's not service personnel right now, but who's
We'll
next?
have the trickle down and what's the next route we're going to affect.
Absolutely. And how many people is that going to keep in West Virginia public education?
As well as the hiring practices, I also understand that it's to address the RIF process in case there are teacher reductions. And we all know that the student enrollment continues to decrease and decrease and decrease, which affects the state aid formula and which affects the formula that counties are getting.
Absolutely. And it was several years ago that the hiring process changed that allowed, it was in the name of flexibility, but also allowed people to increase the political side of hirings and the nepotism side of hirings. And now we're talking about doing the same thing in RIFs and transfers, RIFs being reduction in force. So when they're cutting back, and I always ask, okay, where's the power and where's the money? Because if you want to be able to reduce the force with people who are more senior, they're also more qualified. Is that because you don't think they're doing their job, or is it because you want to save money? What is the purpose of setting up a system where people who have dedicated their lives to teaching are now potentially the first people on the chopping block?
I know years ago when I was in the profession, it hadn't been that many years ago, we would have called this the good old boy network being recreated.
Yes, I believe people have called it the friends and family plan too in former years, but here we go. And it's really hard because I think definitely the House Education that talked to the board the other day said we want flexibility and we want local control. Well, if you're dictating how things are going to happen, that's not flexibility, that's not local control.
Shouldn't start at the legislative level.
Absolutely not.
So I agree with you. And Christine, we're getting a signal here that our engineer's saying we've about missed our time or used our time, and we'll be signing off here with Christine Campbell, President of the AFT, and we hope that people have identified those issues that we've talked about today that will dramatically affect the education, the educators, and the education that students will receive out there in the classroom.
Absolutely. And it's time that we start focusing on public education. We can't just say it. What are we going to do about it?
Make it a priority.
Absolutely.
All right, folks, and we thank you, and we'll be right back in just one moment.
This is the West Virginia Capital Report. Funding for the West Virginia Capital Report is brought to you by Mark A. Hunt and Associates and by the AFL-CIO of West Virginia.
Today's Suddenlink tip: make moving easy. Packing and moving is hard, but Suddenlink can make it a little easier with one simple phone call. When you call Suddenlink, a representative will help you transfer all your services to your new address. Suddenlink will even send a technician to set everything up. One call, one connection, and one bill. Like I said, easy.
Hi everybody, I'm Tom McGee. It's dangerous out there. If you get hurt, shift the odds in your favor. Call Mark Hunt to get your just compensation and compensation for your injury. And if you have any criminal charge or if you get a DUI, be sure to call me at 304-642-6160.
The law firm of Mark Hunt and Associates, specializing in personal injury, DUI, and criminal defense. 304-344-1800.
From under the Gold Dome in Charleston, this is the West Virginia Capitol Report.
Welcome back to the Capitol Report. I'm Dave Perry, and I have with me Josh Sword, President of the AFL-CIO. Josh, welcome to the Capitol Report.
Hey, Dave, thank you for allowing me to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Of course, we're in the third day of the session, and at this point, basically all we've heard is the governor's state of the state, which dealt a great deal with the budget. How do you think the budget will affect revenues and the continuation and the opportunity for employees and people to remain in the state of West Virginia?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. You know, the governor gave his State of the State address this week. In typical Jim Justice fashion, was entertaining without question. But there honestly wasn't a whole lot of specifics. So it's really difficult at this early stage in the legislative process to see exactly, where we stand on certain things like the budget. I mean, obviously, the budget is a big issue. If you look at what has happened the last 3 years, the legislative leadership has really struggled with the budget process. I mean, typically what happens, and as a former lawmaker, you go through the regular 60-day session, and then typically you go into a special session upon the end, at the completion of the 60-day session, to work on the budget. In the last 3 years, it has been a mess, and it's cost taxpayers literally millions of dollars in wasted expenses trying to get an approved budget. This year, as I understand it, the plan is to try to complete the budget within the 60-day window during the regular session. So that's going to be really interesting to see how that all plays out. I mean, the governor and the State of the State talked about the budget being in a much better position than we have been in the last few years, and I think it's probably safe to say that's true, but there weren't a whole lot of details or specifics as to where we are. So it'll be interesting to see how this session plays out related to the budget, if they in fact continue to want to complete the work of the budget during the 60-day session.
Of course, you and I both are very much aware that if the budget is to be done within the 60-day period, bills that would pass after that budget preparation then would cause an additional action on the part of the House and the Senate in terms of supplementals.
Well, that's the reason that this process that has existed up to this point is in place, because if you pass a budget, at that point, any bill that passes after the budget passes that has any impact to the budget, whether in a positive or negative way, there would have to be a supplemental bill passed to essentially amend the budget to include the impact of the legislation. So if you pass a budget, 3 or 4 days prior to the end of the session,
right,
the majority of the bills passed during the 60-day session passed that last week. So you're likely to have a number of bills passed in the last few days that would have an impact on the budget one way or another. There would likely have to be a supplemental for each of those pieces of legislation that impact the budget. It's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out.
And those all come with a price tag, Josh.
Sure they do. Sure they do. That's what's going to be interesting to watch. I think taxpayers are really frustrated as a result of what has happened the last 3 years, and I think that's probably what's driving the legislative leadership's intent to do it this way. But from the practical standpoint, I don't know how it's going to play out.
Of course, I know you mentioned tax, and the governor said no tax.
No taxes.
And he said we're going to have a reduction in the inventory tax, and that would be over a 7-year period, I understand.
Well, that's what we understand too, and the reason that we're paying a whole lot of attention to it, the majority of the money that comes in from the business and inventory tax goes to county boards of education and for our public school system. So we understand that there's a proposal on the table that will eliminate this tax over a 7-year period. What we want to make sure of is that education, our public school system, is not harmed in this process.
And then, of course, the governor proposed pay raises. Of course, you guys represent other state employees, and those were 1%. And we know that a week or so ago that the governor declared a state of emergency in our prisons.
That's correct.
And I understand as we talk right now, the Judiciary Committee is meeting to discuss those pay raises.
Yeah, well, we do have a real, it's a crisis. There's really no other way to describe it within our corrections facilities. We need to do something. So I understand the governor's plan on the table is over a 3-year period to give corrections, folks in the corrections, facilities a $2,000 pay raise each year for 3 years. And that $6,000, will help, in their eyes, attract and retain highly qualified individuals to work in those facilities. I have to tell you, look, I think we have to appreciate the starting point. I'm not sure that it's enough. And I certainly don't think that the rest of public employees, whether you be teacher, school support, personnel, higher ed, or other state employees with a 1% raise gets us to where we need to be. We really need to spend some time and focus on pay for our public employees, both at the state and county level, because these folks provide a vital service to our communities, and they ought to be rewarded with fair pay and good benefits. And quite frankly, the 1% pay raise that has been proposed won't even cover the proposed PEIA increases for the upcoming year. So it's like give in one hand and take with the other. That's gonna be what happens with a 1% pay raise. It's not enough. We need to do much more. And
as you've said, historically, that seems to be what takes place. We give and we take, and we end up with a wash in the end.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point, because for decades now, public employees West Virginia knew that public employment, you probably weren't going to get rich, and pay was always much far below our contiguous states. There were never any questions about that, but we had a solid benefit structure with health care and pension and other benefits that come with public employment. But what we've seen the last, 10 or 12 years is an erosion of our health care benefits through PEIA, in large part because of what's going on throughout the rest of the country, and the cost of health care just growing astronomically. We've got to do something about that, because the benefit package that we offer today is nowhere near the Cadillac plan that it used to be.
That's correct. And as we look ahead towards the 13th year, and of course the labor unions have done an excellent job in terms of providing training and educational opportunities for their employees, and providing the very best educated employee they can put out there for our workers. What do you think about the 13th year proposal?
Well, it's a good question, and I don't know the details of that yet. Here's what I know. If you look at the unions that make up the building trades, they have the best apprenticeship programs that exist. And we're seeing a lot of folks, whether they be in the public or private sector, try to use those apprenticeship programs as models, because they're the highest trained employees. And I think that's the direction that the governor wants to go. It's going to be interesting to see how it would play out and what it would actually mean. But we have to do a better job of communicating or getting the groups involved to communicate. Pre-K through 12 needs to be in constant communication with community and technical colleges, the four-year institutions, the private sector, the businesses and the companies that are going to hire people, so that they truly understand the skills that are needed. Organized labor needs to be a part of it, because we are, in working with our businesses, our contractors, we provide the best training that exists. So all these folks need to be incorporated in order to produce the product that we're looking for, and that's highly trained workers when they come out of school.
And we know that, of course, we're being told that we need 10,000 people in the workforce today.
Yes, that's right, and that's an example of us not doing everything we need to make sure that we have the right people available for these jobs. Look, West Virginians are known for their work ethic, and it's a commodity that travels throughout the country, but we can do better. We can do better. It's just about coordinating and making sure that we're modeling the right projects, and the right projects are the apprenticeship programs that organized labor has been a part of for decades.
Josh, I'm very impressed with the positions you've taken and the interest you've had as it affects all of West Virginians and all of those employees across the state of West Virginia, that the unions have always done this.
Well, I thank you for that, and I believe that's what the West Virginia AFL-CIO is all about. We're out here to defend and support working families. Working families don't have many voices in the political process anymore, and it's unfortunate. We're seeing the gap between those at the top on the income range and those in the middle at the bottom. We're seeing that gap widen over time, and that's unfortunate, because the strongest way to a healthy economy is to grow the middle class. That's what the West Virginia AFL-CIO fights for every day, and we will continue to do so moving forward.
It looks like we're going to take a break. The Capital Report will be back in 1 minute.
This is the West Virginia Capital Report. Funding for the West Virginia Capital Report is brought to you by Mark A. Hunt and Associates and by the AFL-CIO of West Virginia.
Hi everybody, I'm Tom McGee. It's dangerous out there. If you get hurt, shift the odds in your favor. Call Mark Hunt to get your just compensation and compensation for your injury. And if you have any criminal charge or if you get a DUI, be sure to call me at 304-642-6160.
The law firm of Mark Hunt and Associates, specializing in personal injury, DUI, and criminal defense. 304-344-1800.
From under the Gold Dome in Charleston, this is the West Virginia Capital Report.
We have with us today West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin. Joe, welcome.
Good to be with you, Dave.
We appreciate you taking time out to be with us, and obviously I heard you speak earlier today about the heart of West Virginians and your heart for West Virginians, and maybe you can just bring the folks up to date on the kind of things you've been involved with in the last session.
Dave, I've always said that, as West Virginians, we're a product of our environment. We are who we are by where we were raised, who we were raised by, and the values we have in life. And those hold with you all the way through. So even in my political offices I have, the policies that I vote for and try to enhance, or if I am opposed to policy, it's because it doesn't fit in with our West Virginia values. I'm concerned about the health care, people having access to health care, holding people accountable and responsible for this gift of a health care card, learning how to be healthier. But some of my opponents on the other side of the aisle think that they just want to repeal it, and they keep voting to repeal it. I said, I know it needs to be fixed. Can't we work and repair it? Why do you want to throw the baby out with the bathwater? And I tell them, I said, to my Republican colleagues and friends, if you throw it out, if you do away with the Affordable Care Act completely, and you think everything's fine, you've got people still just going to the emergency room where they can't pay. They're not doing any preventive care for themselves to be healthier, and they end up, the hospitals and clinics come back to the state saying we need help because we gave so much charity care away. So let's try to fix it. And that's all we've tried to do, and I'm concerned about that. This tax cut, the so-called tax cut that was done, it was not done permanently for the average person. I spoke to the president. He said, Joe, this is not going to be a tax cut for the rich or wealthy like me. It's going to be for working people. I said, Mr. President, that is great. That'll be wonderful. Well, guess what? It turned out to be anything but that. The permanent tax cut came for the wealthiest people and the largest corporations, and the temporary tax cut came for the working person. So we try to reverse that, and we're trying to fix things, and just trying to find a common sense of how you move forward. There's a thing called net neutrality. Simply means this: the internet should be open and free to the public. There's a movement that thinks that the internet should be controlled by the large companies and corporations. Well, I think there's a balance to be had. I want the companies and corporations to be able to enhance, to invest and make it better, but I also don't want to denigrate the speed or accessibility to the average person. They have a right. So we just sometimes have some differences that hopefully we can work out.
Senator, it would appear that the CHIPS program may be in jeopardy.
You know what, I just said, our priorities, we're based on what our priorities are, Dave. That's a high priority. 50,000 West Virginia kids benefit. They get coverage, health care coverage for the first time. They get dental care, eye vision. And it has been in jeopardy. It's totally in jeopardy and stays in jeopardy, and it's not been a high priority. As we come close to a government shutdown again, which it should never happen, we're now talking about what are they going to do? Do they ratchet it down? Does it make it less attractive? Does it basically we lose thousands of kids off of it? We're fighting to maintain the CHIPS program, which has been very beneficial and very helpful to a lot of families with children.
And of course, West Virginians are always concerned, and Senior citizens are always concerned about our Social Security and the stability of our Social Security system, Senator.
Social Security and Medicare is two things that we're very, very much concerned about. And when they start wanting to cut social programs, here's the thing in a nutshell, Dave. We have a national debt of over $20 trillion. The so-called tax cut bill that my Republican friends and colleagues did, which I advised them, guys, can we just balance this out a little bit? They started out that assuming that we would add another $1.5 trillion to the debt. When you have this much debt, things will suffer. The things that suffer are the people that need it most. And if Medicare and Social Security would happen to be on a chopping block because they said, oh, we're too much in debt, why did you put our country further in debt? So I said there's a balance. We needed tax cuts. We needed tax relief. We needed permanent relief to the average person and the working person that's been left behind. We need to make our corporate tax cuts more competitive. But they didn't have to go clear to 21%, 25%, a 10% reduction was $1 trillion of savings for the corporations. They were tickled to death with that. So I'm just trying to find a balance, just finding a balance of how can we make sure that the person that gets up every day, goes to work, gets a paycheck, and when they look down, it's permanent, they got reductions, they got savings, it's helping them. This is going to be back in limbo in 7 years. And why should the senior citizens be concerned? Why should they be concerned, Dave, that they might have their Medicare cut or Social Security cut because of this tremendous debt we're carrying? They shouldn't. We can fix this. But you've got to start working in a bipartisan way. If we don't start acting like Americans and quit worrying about being a Democrat and Republican, because I can assure you, I don't consider one Republican to be my enemy. I think they're all my friends. We have some differences, but we've always been able to work for them. But this toxic atmosphere that we're in right now almost prevents you, if you're a Democrat, to work with a Republican. If you're a Republican, to work with a Democrat. I don't buy into that. I'm going to work in a bipartisan way for the state of West Virginia and for the United States of America. And you know what? Worry about the politics later.
Of course, as you've always said, and you said earlier today, you have a heart for West Virginians and they have a heart for working class Americans. And obviously, pensions remain a big concern. And it appeared that you had the pension fix, or the pensions fixed. So now I understand that may be unraveling as well.
Dave, for 3 years I worked on the health care, miners' health care, and miners' pension. First of all, it's not a taxpayer's bailout. These are things that people worked for. They worked for it, they negotiated, they paid for it, they didn't take money home, they left it to pay for their benefits. And then the bankruptcy laws kind of wiped them out, and the crash of 2008. So now we're faced, I says, my goodness, you've got to guarantee these people get the Medicare or their health care that they've worked for. Mitch McConnell fought us all the way. For 3 years fought me. We finally got it done at the end of last year. We finally got health care done. Now, he wouldn't put the pensions in. So now we're back fighting for the pensions. We're going to get that done, but it's making it extremely expensive every day we fail to fix it. So we're going to work through all this and continue to work through it. And the only thing I've said, Mitch, let us vote on it. I've got enough votes, Democrat and Republican, that will help the miners and at least respect them for what they have done and let them have what they've earned and paid for. We got health care, I need their pensions. And we're not going to give up until we get them.
Of course, it's obvious always you've been an advocate for the working class Americans and or working class West Virginians.
Well, it's the working people. It's the working people in America. It's working people in West Virginia that built the country. If it hadn't been for the manufacturing work, it hadn't been for the coal miners. I've said this so many times. I said, in West Virginia, we've done the heavy lifting. We're patriotic. We defend our country. We've done the heavy lifting. We mine the coal, the made the steel, and the guns and ships to defend us. We've given every ounce of blood that we have for this great country. Can't we at least honor and respect those people that have helped? They're doing away now with mine safety laws. Our Republican colleagues, I says, guys, why would you relax on that? Some of the regulations as far as the environmental overreach, I agree. They need to be balanced and relaxed some. But the mine safety laws, keeping a miner safe when they go to work, doing away with the black lung, the pneumoconiosis, and the dust rules, that's wrong. We've worked too hard for this, to let them throw that out with the baby in the bathwater. And I'm going to fight against reducing the mine safety laws, that we should make sure that every miner is safe. When they go to work, every family should expect them to return home safe.
Senator, we certainly appreciate it and appreciate you taking the time to stop by to be with us today. And inform the people in your constituency in West Virginia what you're all about.
Well, Dave, I love West Virginia. I'm all about West Virginia. Born and raised in a coal mining camp, so I know who we are, I know what we're about, and I know what our values are. And it's about our families, it's about taking care of our family, respecting our state, taking care of that, and being patriotic to our country. West Virginia's the best.
Thank you, Senator.
Thanks, my
and we
friend.
appreciate you
Okay,
coming on
David.
board. And you've heard
Thank
it
you.
from the Capitol Report from U.S. Senator Joe Manchin.
From under the Gold Dome in Charleston, this is the West Virginia Capitol Report.